Welcome to Pencils and Lipstick. This is a podcast for indie authors. I'm Kat Caldwell, novelist, short story writer, and book coach. Here on Pencils and Lipstick, we're obsessed with all things story, and it is my goal to bring you the writing tips that you need to make your novel come to life. Hi everyone, welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. This is episode 274 of the podcast. Today we have an interview with Joan Schoettler. She is a children's book author. And even if you're not a children's book author, I think that you should stick around and listen because she talks about where she gets her ideas for the stories, which I thought was pretty amazing. So if you are struggling to find what to write about next, I think that you should listen. If you are wanting to write a children's book or a middle grade book, or that is sort of the sphere that you're in, you're definitely going to want to listen about her just journey into being published and, you know, working with illustrators and with her agent and publisher and all those things. I know that we don't talk to children's book authors very often, but that is definitely a place where a lot of people want to get published. And a lot of times, even if you are writing something else, eventually you want to publish a children's book. And I think that that's an amazing goal to have. I do not want to. Well, at the moment, I don't. Somebody made a joke the other day that once you become a grandma, you want to write a children's book, which I'm not sure if that's true, but maybe. So you guys should stick around and listen. That is definitely a traditionally published journey. So if that is also part of your journey, you might want to hear about her story. As far as life goes, it is, end of June already. Unbelievable. I will leave for Spain in a week's time. So next week is our last podcast of the season. The season will start again in August. So you guys get a little break from me. You can still follow me on social media at author_Kat Caldwell on Instagram and katcaldwell.author on TikTok. I will be talking over there a lot, just giving tips and thoughts and ideas. And I'm actually having a really good time on TikTok. I didn't think I would ever say that. And I'll just be working on my books and my writing and getting my kids to where they need to go, and learning more about marketing because that seems to be my life. If you guys aren't at that point yet, you'll get there soon where marketing sort of takes over, right? But we might as well just go with it and learn more about it and be part and present in it. I do realize that for anyone who is watching on YouTube, I haven't shown you the cover, so I thought I would show you the covers. Stepping Across the Desert got a cover recovered, a remix, I guess. And so the new one is here. If you can see it, it's so beautiful. I know you on audio can't, but you should be following me on Instagram and should have seen it anyway. So, or on my newsletter, which is why, you should be on my newsletter. And then this is Stepping Across the Desert. I know here it is matte and then glossy. I just had a bit of a thing I had to do with matte and glossy, and now it is all fixed and they will be coming out of Amazon and Book Vault matte. So this was a bit of a mistake on Amazon's part, the glossy, but it's all fixed now. Yay, the trials and errors of being an indie author. So I have to say the arc, I know I gave you guys a rundown last week. I'm just continuing to be impressed by this group of arc readers that I had. I know that that's not always going to happen. Certainly didn't happen for the Bended Duet. I don't think I did it as good. It was all on me more than anything, just organizing and finding people. And I spent more time on the Kickstarter and then sort of gave up on the arc readers and, gave up looking for them, honestly. Slowly but surely, I'm getting some more views over there. I did find one place that you guys might not know about called hiddengemsbooks.com. I will let you know in August how well that goes, but I signed up the Bended Duet to get like a post-publishing arc reader group over there. Book Sirens has not worked out so well for me. I know it does for a lot of you. It has not at all for me. And you can only put your book up there once. And if it doesn't doesn't work, it's too bad. Book Sprouts was like, meh, it was okay, but it wasn't that great. And again, it just has a lot to do with maybe the time of year or what kind of book yours is, or however, whatever. Um, so I'll be using gemsbooks.com, and we will see how that works. I also wanted to let you guys know a couple things in my whole marketing phase, learning more about marketing. Um, I have I have started to find the things that work best for me. I still believe that you need an author newsletter. If you don't have an author newsletter, I think that you will hit a wall in which it's just going to be harder and harder to market your book. You need an author newsletter to do author swaps or book swaps through BookFunnel or Story Origin app. It just doesn't work to only do social media. And although social media can be super fun, and if you're following me, you've noticed that I'm there a lot more these days, having fun doing it. It is the author newsletter that you cannot forget about, and that is the sort of key piece to all of this. So if you want to get back to your author newsletter or grow your author newsletter, because it does come down to numbers, I want to recommend to you cravebooks.com and booksweeps.com. And Booksweeps is doing something different, in which they have these like month-long giveaways happening that are specifically for either building your newsletter or building your social presence. Although I think it's like BookBub and Amazon followers more than anything. I highly recommend them. Booksweeps for a month is $100, but when I participated, I got over 800 new followers for my newsletter. So 800 new emails, and about 700 have stayed on. I was going to try to give you the percentage of that, but I don't know what it is. Like, so, just to round it out, I guess 10% dropped out. I mean, more than that, but I don't know. I don't know how to do percentages. I have about 700 that have stayed on. Okay. So, which is pretty good. That's higher than what you would expect from a really giant giveaway. And so then Crave Books, I've used them and I got fewer. I think I only got like 300, but it was cheaper as well. So I just want to put those out there. I had never heard about them before, in case you guys haven't heard about them. And Book Sweeps I had heard about, but they changed their way of doing things. I think probably to differentiate themselves from other people. And this has just been like amazing for me, honestly. You can also try authorsxp.com if you haven't tried them before. I've tried, and all these things you kind of have to rotate. You can use something for a long time, and then you sort of have to step back and go somewhere else. So if you haven't heard of Authors XP, it is a little more economically accessible. Don't expect 800, but you'll get quite a few. And she has got a lot of different things going on. Of course, you can do written word media, but that is more for like selling, having a sale and all that. So I will have these links in the show notes below. I just want to sort of give you a new way to get your marketing out there. If you don't understand what an author newsletter is, or don't know how to start one, or sort of intimidated by it, I have a really quick course on it. You can go through it in like an hour and a half. It's really easy. You can always email me and ask me. If I get enough people, I will do it again as a live workshop this fall. It's just one of those things you have to develop. You have to keep at it. You have to learn to talk to your newsletter like they are friends, or your best friend, your best buddy, your family. It's something that you have to do, but I don't think it has to be something that you dread doing. It really should be kind of a place where you get to share about yourself and your interests in your life and whatever. One tip on author newsletters is, a lot of times authors try to put in a ton of information into their newsletter. And I think that you should really stick to two things. And I would say one, except that I don't stick to one. I usually end up having two things, but I'm trying to stick to one. I'm trying to get it down to one. People just don't have time. Like, just think about your life. If you open up a giant email, even if you're interested in it, a lot of times you're opening email when you don't have the time to read it. Um, so many times I flag the emails that I want to read, and so many times I don't go back and read them. What I would like to know, especially from my authors, is when is the book coming out? What does the cover look like? What's the blurb? When can I buy it? How can I support you? All those things, right? So yeah, check out the very quick author newsletter course that I have. It's only $27. It's very accessible. You can always write to me. And if you guys really want a live workshop or you want me to talk about newsletters, just let me know. You can DM me or you can email me. Should be on my email list. You can hit reply to any email and I answer all my emails. So just let me know if that is something that you guys are interested in. So I will see you next week for the last episode. Be sure to follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, and on my newsletter. That is where I will be all summer long. We'll be focusing a little bit more there. You just won't have me in your ear, I guess. You'll have me on the screen. But let's get into the interview. I think that you guys are really going to enjoy listening to Joan talk about her life. And if you guys have kids or grandkids, you're probably going to want to pick up quite a few of her books because they are just, first of all, they're beautiful. Second of all, the idea behind the stories are amazing. Her latest book to come out is called Books Travel the World. It will come out July 1st. The links will be in the show notes below, but I highly recommend you checking out her books and listening to the interview. So I want to welcome to the show Joan Schoettler. Hi, Joan. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm very
Yes.
excited to share part of my journey.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. As I was telling you before, I meet quite a few people who want to break into children's book publishing. I think especially if you are a teacher, like most of my friends are like teachers or they've worked with children or, so you sort of come up with ideas or maybe they've been telling stories. Um, and there are lots of opinions on that it's not too easy to get into it. So I really am excited to talk to you, and I'm sure that the listeners are excited to hear about your journey. So how did you get into storytelling in the first place, or writing?
Very interesting. Often you hear about writers who knew from the time they were young that they wanted to become writers, and you just hear that. That was not my experience at all. I started out as an elementary school teacher, and after about 4 years, I was in fourth grade, I decided I didn't want to teach across the curriculum anymore. So I
Mm,
decided I wanted to focus on what I really loved, and I loved art, I loved different cultures, and I loved children's literature. So I decided to go back and get a master's in children's literature. And it
oh
was so
wow.
interesting because that just was a spark that moved me forward. If I go back and look at what started me with my writing, it was probably that decision because I stepped
Okay.
into children's literature. There was a professor there who taught the literature class, and he said, step into this library. We have 3 hours, read for two, we'll come together and discuss after. So that was probably the seed, even though I
Interesting.
didn't know it, but it was a seed that had me begin thinking about story and plot,
Okay.
and characterization. And at that same time, I was still working with elementary school children. And I moved on and started working with college students. But that whole time with both of them, I didn't really realize this until about 3 months ago when I started thinking about it. Those were my learning experiences because as
Okay.
I was sharing books with them, we were looking at character and plot and setting and word choice and just all those pieces that are part of story. But it
Right.
wasn't until actually a very, very well-known storyteller in Fresno and known nationally, Arnie Nixon, died. And I thought, I'm going to take pen to paper and write a story about him. And that was
Okay.
my first experience in writing. And then
Okay.
from there, I moved forward, and that story is still tucked away. It's a wonderful little trilogy that maybe someday we'll get published.
So when you went to get your master's in children's literature, it wasn't specifically to learn to write children's books. No.
Not at all. In fact, I'll tell you a secret, because I was halfway through the program and I was taking a class on how to teach children to write. And
Okay.
half the class was the sort of the nuts and bolts of what you need to teach the children.
Right.
The other half was to go through the writing process myself. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So what we had to do was write and share with a little group of people, other teachers, teachers and students.
It's not intimidating at all.
I don't know. So I went home. On the way home, I just said, I can't do this. I can't do it. And I came home and I told my husband, I said, I have to drop out of the program. He's like, why? And I said, because I have to write something and share it with someone. I had never done that in all of my teaching, education. Anything that I wrote went to a teacher. It didn't go
Right.
to the class.
Right.
And so that was very intimidating to me. So I laugh now because I thought how intimidated and truly ready to stop the program. And then there was one other thing about that same time. I knew the importance of having children write. So I was
Okay.
working with small groups of children, having them write. And finally one boy raised his hand, he said, Mrs. Schoettler, you have us write all the time, and we share our stories, but you're not writing. And I thought,
Oh,
so these little kernels of things were like little beads on a chain, right? That had me move forward. And
so
then
you stuck with the program and you got
I did. I
shared.
got my master's and then was lucky enough to go on and teach at the university. And I taught storytelling, children's literature, and reading and writing. So
Okay.
all of those things have helped me be where I am now.
Okay.
It really has. It wasn't like any one thing. It wasn't that I
Right.
wanted to just become a writer. The writing piece has been a gift at this age.
Yeah.
Move forward, and I
Well,
have done.
it's just so curious how we get to where we are, right? And a lot of times you don't know that you're getting somewhere until you're there, and then you look back and you go, "Oh, look at that!" But like,
Right.
it is important. Like children have so many stories. Like they're so imaginative, right? Like,
Yes.
and that means that adults aren't as well. It's just that it's kind of life beats it out of us, maybe, or like, that we get busy and on one track or whatever. And so I think it's very cool to encourage kids to write down their stories, right? I love it when a teacher encourages my kids to write a story as much as they complain about it. But it's just, they come up with crazy stuff. It's awesome.
Recently, I was at a dinner and this woman came up to me and she introduced herself and she said, you taught me 25 years ago at State. And she was talking about going through the writing process. Actually, she and her mom were both in the credential
Oh,
program.
how fun.
They were both in my class. And then she went on, she said, every year, she said, if there's one book I read to the children, it's the book that I wrote in your class for you. And I love that. And the children get so excited about it. And then she has gone on and continued that process of having the children write their stories too. And I just think that's so important. And I think so there's that teacher part still that invites children or readers to write.
Yes, yes. I mean, I know that you and I are writers, so we love books, right? But we need to get, like, it's so sad to me when a kid doesn't like reading or adults tell me that they don't like reading. And I'm always kind of stunned into silence of like, what do you say? My answer is always like, then you haven't read the right book. Like there's millions of books, right? So there's just something about getting kids, I think it's, if we can get them to love story from a young age, it will help catapult them in their adult years to just, because there's stories everywhere, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we need to get them into it. Like, and what I do love so you write for children, and a lot of times, in case people don't know, those books are usually the bigger, harder books. They're illustrated, right? So these are like ages probably 4 to 9 or
Exactly.
So
a couple of them are a little bit younger, but mainly 4 to 9.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, they can always enjoy it, right? But so what was the first book that you wrote, and how did you get the idea for it?
The first book that I wrote was not the first story I wrote. The first
Right.
book published.
The first book that's published. That's
There's
right.
a huge difference. It's Good Fortune in a Wrapping Cloth, and it's set in 1700s. And I was inspired at the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco, where there
Okay.
was a display of bojagi, which are Korean wrapping cloths that women made from scraps of fabric. And as I stood there looking at these amazing wrapping cloths that were everything from 4 by 4 inches to 4 by 4 feet, they were just beautiful.
Wow.
And I just thought, I want to know the story about the women behind this. So
Yeah.
I stepped into that arena to begin looking and researching. And I have to say, for me, I tend to write, I love writing about artists and the research part. In a number of my books, I've been able to go have private viewings at the De Young, at the Legion of Honor, at the Asian Art Museum, which
Wow.
has been amazing. So that part of the curiosity is
Yeah.
what I think. If there were three words that I cling to with my writing, one is curiosity, creativity, and community. So the curiosity part is, what's the story about, and
Yes.
all that research.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just
So
go through.
when you saw those, were you like, I'm going to write a children's book about that? Or was it more like, what is that? And how did women do that? And where did they intersect, I guess, between the curiosity
They,
and the writing the book?
they kind of went hand in hand,
Okay.
really, because I wanted to learn more about these beautiful wrapping cloths. And I just thought, I want children to know this. That's what happens.
Yeah.
I come upon an idea and it's like, I want to tell children about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, and I love that it's different cultures. Like I didn't know anything about the wrapping class. That's just what a cool thing to learn about as a kid, right? To be able to
yeah,
come home and be like, I
only
didn't,
the art, and then I always tie art into what I'm doing. So if I go into the classroom and share a story, then I follow it with an art activity or
okay.
give something for the teacher to do. And it's really interesting with that. No, it was with this story. This was the second one, Ruth Asawa, The Sculpting Life. So I did this at a school in Los Gatos, and a mother happened to be in on the presentation also. Months later, I got an email from her, and this is in California. So she was in South Carolina at there's a really big art museum there. I'm blanking on the name. And her family was with their cousins and aunts and uncles, and they were all there, about 10 or 12 people. And all of a sudden, one of her children saw one of Ruth's pieces. And they went running over, and they turned around, and they were like the curator of this museum, because they were telling their family all about this. And I love that. And the fact that she
Yeah.
took the time to write and say,
Yes.
your children are taking the information you're sharing with them and moving forward on it.
Yes. That's so cool.
And
That
so
is so cool.
this one again was inspired at an art museum, and
Okay.
where I just saw these beautiful wire sculptures that Ruth made, and now her work is traveling throughout the world. And right now there's an exhibit at MoMA in San Francisco, and she's just amazing. Not
And
only,
are they like life size? Like that?
yes, they can be, I don't know, 10, not 10 feet, 6 or 8 feet. They're huge.
Wow.
And let me just give you an idea. So this is Ruth in her living
Oh,
room.
wow.
She's working inside the sculpture.
That's so cool.
And when I shared that was taken from a photograph, and when I was reading it once to her great grandson at just a book signing, he says, "That's our living room." And then he went through and said who all of the people were. This is
Oh,
Aunt so and so, Uncle so and so. So this is another example. This was at
there.
I'm not sure, but it's,
Yeah.
so that's her work. Amazing, amazing work.
So did you contact her and say, I've seen your sculptings, I want to write a story? How did you do that?
But this is kind of funny. So I grew up in San Francisco. I don't live there now, but I read her obituary. And when I read her
Oh,
obituary, I said, I need to go up there. And I knew of her just a little bit.
okay.
And her obituary, or excuse me, her celebration of life was between in Golden Gate Park, between the De Young Museum and the Science Museum. in this beautiful, beautiful setting. And as I sat there again, I thought, children need to know the story.
Yes,
So
yes.
from there, Ruth, it's obviously she had died, but I had met her daughter, and we were in close contact, and yeah, just really a wonderful experience there too.
Yes. I just love how you're taking your love of cultures and love of art and bringing them to kids, and in an art that they probably wouldn't find out about otherwise. Maybe if they live in San Francisco, or maybe if they have Korean ancestry, but maybe, otherwise probably not, because there's so much to learn about in the world, right? And like bringing these books to life is just really cool. Did you have the same publisher for both of these books?
No.
No.
In fact, I've had different publishers. My last two books have been by the same publisher, but I've had three different publishers, or four publishers.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
that's, that in a way is the hard part. It's just that
Okay.
submission process. I don't know what your experience was, but it's hard.
It's
Publishing
rough.
so many
Yeah.
submissions, and it just, yeah, it's hard, but you just have to have the tenacity to stick with it. And so
When you are writing these really like robust stories, I mean, I can imagine that the research behind both Good Fortune and A Wrapping Cloth and Ruth Asawa, like there's a lot to tell, but you're writing for the ages of 4 to 9. So I mean, and I'm sure that your background in children's literature helps a little bit, but how do you take the information and all your research and decide what is enough for children of that age?
that's really, it's an really important question. So I always overwrite. I do my
Of
first
course,
draft.
me too.
I always way overwrite. So with Good Fortune and A Wrapping Cloth, when I submitted it, it was maybe 2,300 words, which is really a lot for children's
Is
books.
it?
And so when the publisher said, if you'll cut it by a third, I'd be interested in seeing it again.
Okay. Oof, that's a lot.
How do I do that? This is, something you craft for a long time. You love the characters, and you love the story. So,
Right.
but I wanted it published, so I did it. And I took one whole character out of this wonderful story plot line that he was in,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
learn to do it. And then you just learn to pare down
So
more.
are you really focusing then, because 2,300 words, so then you had to pare it down to what, 1,500?
It's about, I got it to 1,600. And even
Okay.
now, so that was published 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And now that's on the longer side. Now
Really?
for children's books, yeah, they want, shorter is it's probably better. So you're really having.
So really you're following like one person, like one character, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're looking at
Okay.
one character. That character is the person who's taking you through the story.
Okay. Okay. All right. And so when you decided to try to sell that book, because I would imagine, I don't know very many indie authors who are children's book authors. I can't think of anybody, because I think it's still very much, I mean, there's illustrations, there's, which comes with color printing, and there's a lot of technical things that go into it that sort of it's just quote unquote easier to do traditionally, right? That's easy is an odd word for it. But what was your work like in finding somebody to publish it? Like, I know we can say the word hard and we have to like send in submissions, but really like how time frame and like how many submissions and finding the people, what did that feel like?
Overwhelming.
Okay.
And I can't even tell you how many submissions I've sent out.
Lost track.
For all of them. Yeah, there are so many, because first you have to make sure that they do books on diversity, that they do biographies, that they like art. So you could have even 10 publishers who want to do a biography, but maybe they want something in science, or maybe they want something humorous, or they're just not drawn into sculptures like this or bourgeoisie. So it's in a way, it's very personal. And I always feel like I need to do all which I can't say that I do. You need to know what that publisher wants. And you don't always know because,
Yeah.
but so that's right. And sometimes you never know when things just pop up. And that's
Yes. So you just have to keep at it pretty much and keep.
right, right. So I really don't know. I mean, I could go back and I probably have 15, maybe
Okay.
20 publishers that I've submitted to kind of per book. Probably actually this one was really easy because it was
A Home
the
for George.
hospital came to me to publish that. So that one was easier.
And did they come to you after you had already published the other two, or was that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they'd seen my work and
Sure.
that.
Sure. Well,
So
that's a nice little like
I will
breather,
tell you-
right?
I will tell you this was kind of fun with the honey jar.
Yes.
This is a middle grade verse novel. And when I had written it, I needed to have it read by an Armenian person to make sure everything was right. So I called the Armenian museum here and I said, is there someone that you can put me in touch with? I'd like to pay someone to do this. And he said, I'll do it for you. I'll do it. I said, no. I need to pay. No, I insist. He's just the kindest man ever. So he read it and he really, really liked it. And
that's always a relief.
right. So I sent it out, or actually
Okay.
a New York agent sent it, really great guy, sent it out. Nobody was interested. Armenian genocide, tough topic. This is probably 10 years ago. And so he gave it back to me. I sent it out a little bit and then I tucked it away. I thought this just isn't going to go anywhere. And so then the museum person called me on a Thursday and he said, I really want to get that book published. I think it's important. Let's talk about it again. And I said, well, let me try one more publisher. I know of a new publisher in town. And I wrote the cover letter at 4. This is just unheard of. At 7, he said, may I see the whole manuscript? The next morning he called, we're interested. Can we have a phone call Monday morning?
Yeah, that's very unusual.
Unreal. But okay, so the difference is when I first wrote this, I wrote it in prose. And for whatever reason, I'd watched a writing course and they said, take your story and try writing it in a different way.
Okay.
So I thought, I'm just going to try writing it prose. And I did. And just within the first few lines, the prose worked in a way. So I don't know if, that's what caught it and made it go forward. And so it did. And then actually that same publisher, Bushel and Peck, picked up this book too.
Books travel the world. Okay. So how the honey jar, I mean, it's interesting to hear about this. And I always like want to stress to listeners, especially when they're like trying to get published or maybe have published one but want to get the next one. Sometimes it takes years, right? And it just takes that serendipity of let me try this one.
I have a book that I want published so badly. Like if I had one more book published, that's the one I want published. And I'm just having a hard time finding.
Really? Yeah. So, yeah. It just takes tenacity and serendipity and faith, so you can never really give up, right? But maybe take a break and and sometimes like people will come back to you. It's just very, very strange. But the honey jar, so the honey jar is completely different then. Like, how did you get that idea?
So I live in Fresno and there's a large Armenian community here. And we had a town hall meeting where there's some 4 scholars on it that presented on a panel. This was close to the 100-year commemoration of the genocide. So I came home and there was someone redoing our bathroom. And when Caleb came out, I only had met him that day, and his name's Caleb Kazarian. I said, well, Caleb, how did your family come to Fresno? And he said, well, that's an interesting story. He said, it was my grandfather. And he said, read this here. He said, it starts out, I gave my sister away. She was 2. I was not yet 9. His grandfather was 8. They were having to leave Kars in Armenia. The Turks were coming in, and the mother was too sick to go with them. The father stayed with the mother. The grandmother and aunt and uncle were leaving, so they were with family. So this young boy had these 3 young siblings, and it's his story. And of course, if when you think of a movement of people, they don't all stay together. They mean to stay together. They don't. So it's a story of the separation. And at one point, it's been days and weeks, and he's cold. He's hungry. The girls are cold and hungry. And a woman came up to him and said, "Let me help you with the baby." And he gave his sister away.
Oh, wow.
And so that's
Oh, that's so heartbreaking.
and but it has a wonderful ending.
Good.
And it's amazing. I mean, this family is an amazing family, and yeah, they just are very special in all the ways that they give back to the world.
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting to me too is just the way that you've come to find these stories is by getting out into the world and talking to people, right? I think sometimes we as writers can be very comfortable in our offices, right, in our imaginations, but really to be inspired, whether you're writing a true story or maybe a fiction based, off of something that people say, like, it's important to get out there and to talk and hear other people's stories.
And not only that, it's just such a rich experience because you're not only going out to hear their stories, but you're connecting to them in other ways, and you're just learning so much. So that's just a very important piece. And then to be able to share it with children is amazing. I shared this story at an Armenian school in just outside of Pasadena. They were 5th graders, and it was when I said I was from Fresno, all of their eyes got really big, and they're like trying to raise their hand and tell me something. And I said, and then the teacher said, they know Fresno. They went to Fresno because this is where the home of William Saroyan, or longtime home of William Saroyan. They came to see his museum and his graveside, the graveside of someone else, and had this connection. They knew that this was a place of home in a way for Armenians, just as where they live is too.
Of
but
course.
There was connectedness, and they were a wonderful class to share it with. It was an amazing experience.
I think it's such a good idea it's so needed to have these stories that have kind of slipped from the I guess, like, the basic cultural knowledge. I mean, it's good to understand all of our historical ups and downs, but there are a lot of stories and really traumatic events and things that smaller groups maybe of people know because they hear it from their grandparents, right? But it's good for us to understand and know. I would assume a lot of people don't know about the Armenian genocide.
There are so many people who are surprised.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it's been tucked away in the back of their mind. And people will always say, that's a story. We have part of that story in our family. It's not the same story, but there's this piece and that piece. And so, yeah, so that's a very important. In this story, I shared it with a group of 4th graders in Chicago, and one of the boys, it was so wonderful because I had them, they read it, they listened to their teacher read it, and then they did an annotated dialogue. They'd gone through and found special things that they really liked. And so let me just read the first.
Yes, please.
Chapter 1. Well, I guess I could read it. One autumn, at our house at the edge of Kars, Papa's horses and cattle feed nearby. Mama's bees make honey. My sister leapfrog over each other, and I shoot marbles with my cousins and friends. So that's just the beginning. One of the first questions that a boy said is that he said, you said those things in that first paragraph. Did you know that you were going to talk about all those things later in the story? So for him, I love that.
Yes.
But I just thought that was so interesting that he picked up on that there was something I introduced at the very beginning that made him curious as we went all the way through.
Right, right. Like
That was
bringing that, like there was a little boy a long time ago, like me, that used to play, and then this thing happened. And like school history class, there's a lot of history and there's only so much time to teach kids, right? And so what's so amazing about children's literature is that they can learn about other things that happened in the world
right.
and that they probably won't learn about in class.
Mhm.
But you said that it ends happy. Is that necessary for children's literature, that it end happy?
This story just did. I mean,
Okay.
there's a lot of hard
So you
things.
didn't have to make that up. That was
No, no, this
true
is,
to the
yeah, no,
story.
in fact, at the very end, there is a picture of the family. This is the family in Armenia in about, when he's at the young boy's like 8, and here he is later with his
Oh,
sister back in Armenia. And yes, so it's, yeah.
so
It,
that one ended. So you didn't have to sort of
oh,
twist the
and
story.
that was a real, it was very important to me that I portrayed it correctly, but also gently.
Mm.
So that it's not something, in fact, just the other day, I was at a signing and a woman bought it for her son. And I asked her how old he was, and she said third grade. In this book, they're saying third grade and that. And I said, you might want to read it with him because there are just a couple places where there are concerns. And she said, don't worry about it. She said, we're Greek and we have seen and we know hardships, whether she's going back in time, whatever. And I thought, and the thing, one of the things that really surprised me when I started doing the research, and it's sad, sad thing, is how many genocides there have been in the last century and
Yeah,
continue now. So this is really a universal story. It's not,
right.
I mean, I'm honoring the Armenian people and what they went through. That is just paramount,
Yeah.
but there are similarities. And
Yes.
so that's, yeah.
Yes. I mean I just went to a dinner a week ago and heard a man's story about his family leaving Georgia, and I didn't know anything about that war. And that
Right.
was within my lifetime. I mean, I'm
Yes,
older than
yes,
this young man. And I thought, I mean, it's just one more thing. Like there are so many stories to tell, right?
yes.
And so like and honestly, like anyone can tell the story. You just have to tell it gently, right? Depending on your
Right.
audience, and
Yeah.
and get it right. Did you have I guess just like with Ruth Asawa, you knew the family, so you worked with them to get
Right.
the
Well, the
story.
first, after Kalen told me that, I mean, right then when he finished the story, he said, I would love to write the story for children.
Right.
I said,
Yeah.
but before that, we need the, permission from your,
Sure, sure.
family is okay with that. So
Sure.
he
But
read different versions of it and, so, yeah.
that's so amazing. I just that one is called The Honey Jar, an
And John,
Armenian's Escape to Freedom.
right.
And that one is mostly like you would say mostly third grade and up, kind of middle school,
Yeah, definitely.
late
And I
elementary.
cannot tell you how many adults have loved it and have bought
Mm,
it for other adults. And who've said,
sure.
that's our story, or I didn't know it. And what I loved when I had my first signing, and it was mainly adults for that one, and they opened it up and they said, but it's like written like this. Why did you write it like this? So there were a lot who had not written, or excuse me, read books in verse.
Okay. Oh my God.
And so it's just, tight and sharp and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But you bring up a good point though. Like there are quite a few adults that enjoy reading middle grade or I don't know, YA books for various reasons, right? But you also bring up like children's books are interesting because the people who will buy them are adults, even if
and
they
they
are,
have to like.
they have to like them. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Someone just recently, I think it was a publisher lecture that I was listening to, and that's exactly, you have to hook the adult into. It's not just for the child, because the parent, if it's for a young child, they're going to have to want to read it over and over again. So it has to have this appeal to them and to the child. So you're writing for both audiences in a way.
Isn't that interesting? It's something that you don't maybe don't think about when you're first going into it. But yes, you have to get the adult to buy it. And yes, they might end up reading it
Yes.
500 times.
And someone had actually an agent once told me that when you get to the end of the story, the writing has to be good enough. The story has to end in a way that a parent is going to want to go back and reread it again. That's a sign that the crowd
Oh,
says, read it to me again. That's
yeah.
very important. And that's tucked away in the back of my mind. So for all of the children's book writers out there, I thought that was very, very good advice.
No, that is interesting advice because it's not like go find the next book that the author wrote. No, it's reread the same book because the audience is different. Kids are different, right? So you had that's quite a heavy topic, the honey jar. And then your book that comes out, the next book that comes out in July, correct?
Right.
Books Travel the World. That's a completely different story. So
Totally different. So I think this is all a sign of my attention deficit is probably what's going on here, here and there and everywhere.
you have lots of interests and curiosities, as you've said.
When I think about this book and where it came from, it goes back to my childhood, really. So when I was young, while education and reading was very important, we didn't have a lot of books, not affordable at that time. I just don't remember a lot of books. But one of my mother's friends always gave us her National Geographic magazines. And I loved, even before I could read, just looking through it. I loved the different cultures. I loved the animals. I just loved it from a young child. To this day, I have subscribed and shared it with my sons. They get subscriptions too.
Yeah.
And so that's one piece. And then children's literature. So this is about books. And I really believe that children everywhere need books, and it doesn't always happen that works like that.
Right.
So I had read a story about a librarian who got books to children in unusual ways. And so I went through and I just found different places throughout the world that it might be a librarian, it might be a former teacher, it might be a parent, it might be someone who loves books, who knows that children far away from a city don't have access to them. So how are we going to get books there? Sometimes some of them started by just carrying the books under their arms and sharing them with the children.
Sure.
But in this story, it starts out, this book, it will not be out till July 1st, but it starts out with children waiting. It says, all around the world, children wait for books. So
I love those pictures.
They're wonderful, yes. And so they travel over hills and across rivers and down valleys to get the books to children. And then and then when we talked about the children, children wanting to hear a story over again. So this is one. So in Colombia, a librarian and his donkeys, Alpha and Beto, begin their day-long journey. Packed saddles swell with books for children in faraway towns. The teacher reads, the children do too. They dream of what they might be: astronauts, inventors, actors. Before they choose a book for home, they always say, one more story, please.
Of course.
And the other day I read it, there's a little 5-year-old girl across the street, and she came over and the book had just arrived. And I hadn't read it to anyone. And so she sat down and I read it to her, and she's just 5, will be starting kindergarten. And as you turn the page, each one says, one more story, please. And by the 3rd page, she was reading that. She knew that that's what the children were wanting on each of the pages.
One more story, please. Oh, that's wonderful. That is, all of your books are so beautifully illustrated. Just
very, very lucky. That, to me, that it's just, my publishers have been wonderful in choosing just the right person.
Yeah. So when you are publishing your books, you don't come in with the illustrator. They kind of get assigned, I guess.
You really have no say. And it's interesting because with my first book, The Good Fortune, when I asked when the publisher said she was interested, I said, well, what kind of illustrations are you thinking of? Because I wanted watercolors. This Jessica Lannon, who has gone, this was her first book and my first book, and she has gone on to do amazing stories. And when I saw the illustrations, they're beautiful, beautiful watercolors. This one's my favorite.
Oh, wow.
So here, Jesu is, her mother has been chosen by the king to Sobujagi forever in his palace, and she wants to
Wow.
go Sobujagi. So here she's dreaming. Swinging is
Yeah,
a wonderful exercise,
that's beautiful.
not exercise, but something that they have.
Yeah.
So she's dreaming of going over the wall and joining her mother.
Wow. That's
But anyway,
beautiful.
so she said, you really don't have a say in who the illustrator is. I said, I know that, but I was just wondering. So when she sent me the illustrations, I knew that was perfect. And then, and each publisher over the years has had an invitation for me to look at illustrations, but by different people, and say, just what's your opinion? It may or may not
Okay.
go forward in that way, but I am thrilled with all of the books I've read.
Okay. Okay. And then I assume you've written kind of the story, right? But
Mhm.
words on a Word doc or a PDF are just words. So do you sort of have in your head already how you want the like how many words you put on each page?
Right.
Or is that something that you work through with between the illustrator and you and the publisher?
Well, you should have an idea of what
Okay.
words you might make like a dummy and put the words on the different pages so you know about where page breaks would be and where the illustrations might be. That doesn't mean that the illustrator and the publisher might totally change that.
Okay.
They and you have to be open to listening to their comments. With Books Travel the World, there were a couple things that I thought, oh, that's so great in the story, and they just said, well, let's try it this way, and
Mhm.
they did a fabulous job with it. And
Yeah.
I yeah, and I think that the illustrators bring gifts to the story that you don't even know about. I mean,
Okay.
I think all of these flowers, it's just, and the colors in this book are just,
Yeah.
they look at that glass with all the children reading all around the world.
Yeah. It's so pretty.
It's wonderful. And even when David, I just got this book a week ago, yeah. And
Yeah,
when
fine.
I opened, just that beginning, it's an invitation for children to step in, children and librarians and teachers to step into the book. I think it's
Yes.
amazing. Um, so, and in this book, Jessica, I asked her if she had a cat. So there's a little cat in here, if she liked cats or if she had a cat. And she said, no, well, if she liked them, but she didn't have one. And throughout the story, she put, so this little girl's mother has left. And of course, she's
Right. Right.
seen her. But she has a cat throughout. And so she
Oh,
said, I put that there because I wanted her to have a constant. I
yeah.
wanted to have something in her life. Her mother's gone.
Oh,
I love that. I thought
yes.
wonderful. Yeah. So
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like kids experience stories so differently, right? So you're making me like go back however many years and thinking of all the nights of reading all the books, and like, but you're right, the illustrator just brings something different because for the 10th time of reading, it's so interesting that the kid will see or envision something different, maybe suddenly they see the cat, oh, the cat's on every page, you go, oh, as the
right.
adult, because you're just getting through bedtime.
So it's so interesting reading it to young children, and that one of them will almost always say, "There's a cat in the book. I have a cat," and then all of a sudden the children want to go back through and see the cat on every page. And
Yeah.
I think a good picture book can also be a book that a child can go through and sort of tell a story
Yeah.
in their own
Yeah.
words.
Right.
And even if they haven't read the story yet, they kind of what's going on here? Who is that person? And
Right.
the pictures invite them in to tell the story too.
Yes, absolutely. That is a very important part of that. Oh, this is so wonderful. But then I guess for the illustrations, the honey jar, because it's a middle grade, is it illustrated or is
No,
it, yeah, because so
it's
once
just
we get into middle grade, we don't
right, right.
illustrate. Okay. Okay.
So it
There's all
just,
these little rules to,
right, right. But it's, yeah, it's,
but I love how you have the pictures at the back. I always loved that as a kid. Like if I was reading something,
uh,
Corey ten Boom, or I always, went flip to the pictures to see what they look like.
which is, yeah, and yeah, it's really, it's a special piece. Do you have time for me to read a
Yes,
little
yes,
bit?
that's please, please.
So I read the very beginning. So in this, so now we know that the young boy's name is Bedros in the story, and he is heading off. And I need to switch glasses here because I need to. So now they have left and they're going through there with other people in their community. So there's a group they're moving through, and they've gone through a canyon. And in the canyon, there's shooting going on. It says when the shooting stops, so he has three sisters. Okay. When the shooting stops, Hasmig's eyes hold panic and terror. I mask my fear and shudder at the unknown. I pat each sister from head to toe to assure myself that they are fine. I exhale slowly. Here, I remove the cork lid from the treasured jar, Mama's honey. Dirty fingers dip into the sweet golden liquid. The girls are distracted for a moment. One more taste, I offer. The girls lick fingers for any remaining sweetness. I gaze from beyond the boulder, and I hear moaning. Dadig, means grandmother. Dadig, I call. I hastily look for my grandmother. Uncle Sambat's mustard-colored hat draws me from our hiding place. Dadig, I call one final time. No answer. Panic fills me. Others call names of missing family members. Ari, Vardan, Margrit, Narig, Yeva. Pushed and herded like anxious travelers, I step around the bodies of people. A man holds his leg and cries out, I can't stop. I have to care for my sisters. My knees shake, my hands tremble. I hold tightly to my coat. I order Hasmig and Talim, close your eyes, and I lead them around the dead and dying bodies. That was so hard to write. It's hard for me to read now. And that's just the only part that is very descriptive like that in the story. But it's what happened.
It's what happened. Yeah.
What happened. So that truly was the hardest part. And then he gives his sister away, and the father comes back to him, and there's a lot of grieving going on. And now they're on their way. It's toward the end of the book. And so now the uncle and his family and Bedros and his father and siblings are getting ready to leave on a boat. In the middle, and so the father and son have not been communicating very well. There's such raw hurt and sadness. Anyway, in the middle of the night, I wake to the mournful song of a flute. Papa's sleeping carpet is empty. Poetic, mellow, and whispering, the sounds of Papa's flute call me into the night. Silently, I tiptoe. On a bench sits Papa overlooking the sea, an expanse we will soon cross. I stand behind him, looking at the stars, listening until he finishes. His sorrowful song matches my own heartache. Setting his flute beside him, his hands brace his knees, and I know he is crying. I sit by his side. I slip my hand in his. My heart pounds at the boldness of my action. Silence. Papa puts his arm around me and draws me close. You were young, he whispered. I should have known better. I melt into his embrace. Our tears, painful, sorrowful, and mending. Two hands firmly grasp Papa's and mine. The door to forgiveness opens, and we meet at the threshold. I feel like his son again.
Ugh.
I mean, I just love that part. And I mean, that's that whole forgiveness. Yeah. And at the end of his father's life, at this point, Bedros is going to go back to Armenia and to look for his sister. And the father says, if you see her, tell her I love her. And if she has died, take a handful of dirt from her grave and bring it back to me.
Oh,
So you see that whole piece, that circle of that love that's gone on forever, but that
yeah.
circle of hope, that circle of forgiveness, and anyway, so
I mean, I think that is such an important part to also have. I mean, for adult stories, but also for kids stories to like it's not just heartache, it's also the love, it's also the forgiveness. And these are all very big ideas and themes for even adults. Like you and I are both tearing up, like
I know. Sorry to
um and I think that it's so far away for kids, for most American kids, we'll say. But as we all know, stories sink into us and we start thinking about them at different points in our life. And this is something to be able to see all these different things and to think, wow, like, but he was only 9, but look at all, but what would I do, and how his dad forgave him for this and I should forgive my sister for that, or like all these things sink into us, these very big themes. And stories so wonderful that we get to sort of grapple with life through them.
When I was in this fourth grade class in Chicago, they had read the story, so they had marked places in the story, and it was so interesting. 4 children in particular were responding, and one of the girls, if it had been my first day in that classroom as a teacher, I would have learned so much from each of their responses. So this little girl, her responses were things like, at the beginning of the story, he has a dog. She said, I have a dog too. I have a sister too.
Right.
I, there was another loss, but she was just talking. She was really connecting as a person. Another
Mm.
one, I loved it. He said, you talk about food in this book a lot. Why? And I said, well, for 2 reasons. I said, when you are hungry, you think about food. You think about the next place that your food is coming from. But also, if you know the Armenian people, they are so embracive and so inclusive, and give their food so graciously and welcomingly. When Kalen was and his wife invited my husband and I over for dinner early on, and there were 8 of us for dinner, and the table was set for 20. I mean, there's enough food on the table for 20.
Yes.
And another time I went in to speak to an Armenian head of some schools, and she said, it was 9:30 in the morning. She said, would you like a cup of coffee? And I said, no, I'm fine. And as we were sitting down in her office, she said, are you sure you don't want some coffee and a little something? I said, no, I'm fine. And then after an hour, we got up, and I commented on a painting that was behind in her office behind me. And she took my arm and she said, now we will have the coffee and pastry and we'll talk as friends. And it was, and I said to Caleb, I said, I think I made a big mistake. And he said, you never turn the offering of food down. And that's true. I mean, my
It's true. Yeah.
friends they're just always so gracious. So that, that was the piece too.
It's kind of the glue that brings you together, right? But I mean, yeah, it's so wonderful to see how kids relate to the stories, right? And that's
Oh,
just the first time around. Then they'll read it again, or they'll start thinking about other things. But even that little bit, when your book can impact a kid, and maybe the next time he, like sees or it feels hungry or sees food and like thinks, oh, I can do this as part of not just nourishing me, but having a relationship, right? And like this
mhm.
different way of, or I can relate to this little kid in the story because he has a dog and I have a dog. I just think that's wonderful.
And it was in one of the classes, the principal was and the teacher were both there, and I was talking about, in terms of writing, all of the information you don't put in the story,
Right.
all the research you do for your own personal knowledge in terms of how you're
Right.
going to write it. So one of the things is the Armenian children at that time, they did a lot of leapfrog.
Mm.
Big guys doing, no, they were leapfrogging. And the principal said, I used to do that. No, that was it. That was it. That was one of the leapfrogging, but they played a game with seven stones, I think. And they lined the stones up like a little kind of a pyramid, and then they would take a ball and try to knock it down. Kind of
Oh
like
yeah.
kind of a bowling kind of thing. And the principal said, I used to do that when I was young, but we would use bottle caps
Oh,
instead of stone. So then I would continue a little bit longer. And oh, what's the other one? And the principal said, maybe that was not the principal, the teacher said, maybe it had to been in the book. There was something else that they did, and he said, that's what I used to do. So now the children are seeing this connectedness of a story. Leapfrog
yes,
also have done leapfrog at some point, but hearing their adults in their world who are Armenian and who are telling their stories that tie
right.
into. So it gives a certain validity to it too.
Yes, absolutely. Kind of brings it actually physically to earth, right? Instead of
Exactly.
in the story world. That's so fascinating. So I think we could probably talk forever, but
We could. This has
we
been
will
really
have you
wonderful.
on your next book, but I will have the links to the show notes below and just Joan Schoettler, although it's not spelled phonetically, so I will
At
definitely have
all.
the links in the show notes. But I just encourage people to pick up these books and like Joan to just have the tenacity to keep pushing and keep trying to get your story out there and keep refining it, because you never know, right, Joan, when you'll
Exactly.
get
You
a public.
don't know. And even though, I remember my father saying years ago when I was looking for my first job, and he said, when you've gone to 10 places for a job, go to one more because maybe they'll
Yeah,
get a job. And that's what happened with my first job. And now I think, those little words in the back of my head, and my dad's still talking to me, send it out one more time.
one more time.
Next week, I'm sending out the one that I really want published, and we'll see if it moves forward. And I'll let you know right away.
Yes, and we will celebrate and you can come back on. But and then Books Travel the World, that will be out July 1st.
July 1st, yes.
July
And you can
1st
now pre-order on Amazon.
on Amazon. So we will have the links
And these
below.
are by Bushel and Peck, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They're both at the same, the Honey Jar and Books Travel the World. Thank you so much, Joan, for coming on and talking to us about your writing journey and about your books.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and yeah, we'll stay in touch.